Hi, this is Shelby Morrison, music historian, resident rebel girl, and VP of Curatorial Operations at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're listening to Into the Vault, a mini podcast within a podcast where I get to nerd out about an artifact inspired by Kathleen Hannah's conversation in the main podcast, Music Makes Us. The idea for this podcast actually came from a museum exhibit called Revolutionary Women in Music, Left of Center. And with Into the Vault, we want to bring this exhibit to you. So today, I get to talk about Björk, an artist who embodies freedom of expression through her creativity and eclectic style. Every artistic element that Björk delivers comes from her own personal and deeply emotional inspirations. Her musical compositions, the mesmerizing music videos, avant-garde clothing, that dynamic vocal range, and curiosity. Previously on Music Makes Us, Kathleen Hannah was able to link up with Icelandic Chinese singer-songwriter Laufey. The two of them had a fascinating conversation about fairy tales, giving advice to your younger self, and how breaking the rules can jumpstart the creative process. To wrap things up, Kathleen and Laufey jumped right into the artifact game, looking at a featured item we are proud to have in our collection from Björk. They're both big fans of the Icelandic singer, and Laufey talked about how inspired she was by the way Björk approaches and deconstructs genre.
I'm genuinely so in awe of her. She's so cool. And even though our music is so incredibly different, she has some amazing jazz records, truly.
Yeah.
Her takes on jazz standards are so unique. But the way that she has crossed genres and broken down walls between genres and just been ultimately herself while also introducing Iceland to the world, has actually, done so much for me as a musician. That's so beautiful that she's created that road for Iceland to even be talked about in that way, in an artistic way.
And I would be remiss to not mention one of my favorite parts of the interview, where Laufey showed us the correct way to pronounce Björk.
Björk. Björk. You see, people have a hard time saying Laufey, and I'm actually, if you say Björk the way that it's meant to be pronounced, it's actually might be harder.
I could listen to her say that over and over. Björk began her career with her Icelandic alt-rock band, the Sugar Cubes, before breaking out as a solo artist. She is an experimental storyteller with a powerful voice and unique style that transcends genre and geography. And as any Björk fan knows, that style is also expressed in her clothing. One of her biggest fashion moments was her grand red carpet arrival for the 2001 Oscars. Björk had received a nomination for Best Original Song for her track, I've Seen It All, which she wrote for Dancer in the Dark, a film she also starred in. She arrived at the ceremony adorned in a shimmering bodysuit and striking white dress resembling a swan. Though it was received with mixed reviews at the time, the dress has since become legend and has been referenced by everyone from Valentino to Rosalia. But even before that moment, Björk was making bold statements. The artifact featured in the game was a jacket modeled after a postage envelope that Björk wore in 1995 on the cover of her multi-platinum album, Post. This jacket, designed by art world favorite Hussein Chalayan, is actually made of a paper-like material, not fabric. It is white with blue-red trim around the lapels, drawn from the color scheme of international airmail. Vice called this piece one of the ultimate fashion moments of Björk's career. This album captures Björk at a real point of transformation. She just moved from Iceland to England, landing right in the middle of a buzzing club scene and a much faster, louder way of life. That cultural shift seeps into every track. The music becomes bolder, more experimental, and more connected to dance culture, reflecting the energy of her new surroundings. It is a striking contrast to the quieter intimacy of her first album, Debut, and it marks Björk's emergence as an artist willing to absorb her environment and reshape it into something entirely her own. We can hear that resilience from the very first single off the album, Army of Me.
And if you complain once more, me time, I
Björk was quoted as saying, "I always knew it would be 2 albums, and that's why I called them Debut and Post, before and after." The title itself is a nod to Björk's need to stay in touch with friends and family back in Iceland while she was building this new life abroad. The cover was photographed by her boyfriend at the time, fashion photographer Stefan Sinawi. Behind her is a vivid, colorful whirlwind of personal belongings and postcards, almost giving the illusion that Björk herself is being carried through the royal mail, perhaps back to her homeland she was longing for. Funnily enough, even before the game began, and before any mention of Björk, Kathleen and Laufey talked about wearing something made out of paper.
I feel like I have worn a paper dress before. I'm trying to definitely in one of my adventures in the past few years, I feel like I've worn something paper.
Beyond the paper jacket and the swan dress, Björk has almost too many notable fashion moments to count. But to name a few, there was a headpiece of giant fuzzy rainbow palms, a sequined skirt depicting Michael Jackson, a full face mask of crystals, a glowing facial sculpture, and many more that are practically too eccentric and ethereal to even put into words. Björk uses clothing as an extension of her avant-garde music and creativity. When she creates, she said that she enters the recording studio in search of ways to recreate sounds that she's experienced in nature, trying to find out-of-the-box ways to allow fans to experience the sonic landscape in her mind. For her, songwriting is a way to communicate when conversation fails. I think what we hear in Björk's songs is emblematic of her belief that, quote, "music is the one world that we can cover all the emotional levels of yourself." Björk has been celebrated for her work in many ways, including 4 MTV Music Awards, 5 Brit Awards, and 2 Cannes Film Festival Awards. Her reach goes beyond the music, as she's been an advocate for environmental justice in Iceland and was the main subject of a 2015 retrospective exhibition at the MoMA in New York, where this iconic jacket was also featured. Now preserved in our exhibit, Revolutionary Women in Music, Left of Center, this special artifact becomes part of the larger story of these incredible visionaries such as Björk, Kathleen Hannah, and more. A story that we are thrilled to share with you here inside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This has been Into the Vault with me, Shelby Morrison. This was produced by Jocelyn Gonzalez, Morgan Flannery, Yuri Lasordo, Risa Gerke, and Melanie Wiggins. Tune in next week to find out who Kathleen gets to nerd out with, only on Music Makes Us.